Welcome to Law and Justice. This is a special series on how to talk policy and influence people, and I'm delighted to be joined by Colette Kelleher, a legend and former senator. And thank you for agreeing to talk to me, Colette.
You're very welcome. I'm delighted. The topic is close to my heart, and it isn't often that anyone asks me, so when they do, they're sorry. So so much to say, so the question will be how to stop me, but that
okay.
You'll be good.
We'll see how we go. So Colette, I know a bit about your background and the many interesting jobs that you've had and ways that you've engaged with policy, but perhaps you can tell our listeners and viewers a bit about yourself and how you've engaged with the policy making process over the years.
Yeah, I suppose I've always been interested in policy, law and practice. I suppose they're the three sort of arcs of kind of my working life. I trained as a social worker, and the kind of grounding that we got way back in the day in UCC, our class celebrated a 40th anniversary of our start.
Okay.
And I think, we were a bit kind of ramshackle. I was poor enough students in terms of handing in essays, but I was very interested in the subject matter. And I suppose the whole kind of idea that always kind of has informed me wherever I've been is that all private problems are public issues. And that's always been the case, whether I've been a community worker in Finglas, which is the job that I started off, whether I was working in campaigning in the UK around childcare, in disability and homelessness, and working around dementia. And then kind of, I suppose, being in the Seanad as a legislator, all that kind of arc of law, policy and practice kind of comes together and came together. And so that informed a lot of the work that I pursued while I was in the Seanad, and the things that were happening around it, like the Repeal campaign as well. So that, that's been, I go back to that link, C. Wright Mills' sociological imagination, and it's very similar to the personal is political, and sort of a strong theme that ran through the feminist movement. But it is that, if you look at kind of what happens to individuals and the lives and the struggles that they have, as well as them being personally experienced, and you've done so much in kind of educating us all on things like polyvagal theory, how we embody those sort of struggles and difficulties, and we inherit them, and sometimes we don't even know we've inherited them.
Yeah.
But as I said, we look at each other as individuals, but then there's also collective responses and remedies to those individual traumas and tragedies that beset people. And that's always been, I suppose, a thread that and it's very much a social work kind of orientation to the world. And I think a few years ago I trained with the Tavistock Institute, which was fascinating. It was all about kind of change and why things happen and why things don't in organisations. And it was just after a fairly difficult few years in Cope Foundation, where I was working, just to keep the wolf from the door, because it was at the time of the last recession. We'd probably have another one now. But also there was sort of a very strong movement around a decongregation, and I think that's an interesting case study of brilliant policy but really poor sort of buy-in to that policy, and just the kind of the resistance there was to those ideas in some parts of the organisation, not all.
Okay. And so Colette, you were in the Seanad for the last 4 years. Can you tell me a bit about that experience?
Oh, it was an absolutely fascinating experience. First of all, I never expected it. I got a call on a day, and a Thursday. I was in Dublin. As I said, I expected it to be about some issue that had arisen in Alzheimer's day service in Cork, because we'd often get calls from politicians. And Neil Martin was on the phone. As a politician, I have a lot of time for. I think he's done some fantastic work around disability and special needs, and of course the smoking ban. And we wouldn't have always agreed. We'd have had a lot of jousts when I was in Cork Simon. In fact, my first conversation with him was rather adversarial.
Right. Okay.
I just arrived back from England, and I put some press release out about homelessness issues in Cork, and I remember getting a very interesting phone call, and we had kind of a sharpish enough exchange about, and who are you anyway?
Yeah.
But we got, we did better afterwards, and he was always very, I mean, he's a politician who's interested in policy.
Yes, and he's smart.
And he's very smart, and once you have him and he's convinced, then he does follow through on things. And so, and I suppose that was the interesting thing as being in the Oireachtas. Obviously it's about law and policy and all of that, but it's not everybody's an enthusiast, Jane, like you and I are.
Okay.
Some people are, and I think that's one of the things that people who are trying to influence from the outside in need to understand, that not everybody is a policy wonk.
Yeah.
They're interested in other things. And that's kind of...
You mean?
Exactly. And
right.
So like I was interested in your tweet, which I kind of was a bit defensive about, is that you sent out about the committee.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Because actually, no, but I think it's important to understand your audience.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes we think that we've sent a letter, or we've sent an email, or we've sent a long report, and God, that's it, then we've our job done. It's actually a much, much longer game than that.
Oh, well,
and
yeah.
And I know you know that, and I know you were just being sort of prodding. Yeah, and provocative has a role, but I think it's important to understand that sometimes it's a fairly long road. And if you look at, say, repealing the eighth, I mean, the campaign on that started kind of, almost immediately after that wretched article was put into our constitution. So that was like 35 years.
Yeah.
So, I think we have to, those of us who are involved in wanting to things to be different, have to be prepared for a long game, actually, and to have stamina for that. And I think that's one of the biggest things, and not to be too downcast or set back by disappointments. Like that,
that is very very true from my own limited experience of it as well. But also the importance of building relationships with people who might be open, but also those who you think might not. You can surprise yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the other thing is, I suppose, in the Seanad, because I was independent and obviously worked very closely with the Seanad civil engagement group. We worked together, but we also went our own ways on our I don't think there was anything we disagreed with each other, but different people took different leads on different things. But it was easy. It's easy to talk to people who agree with you. Mm-hmm. It's much more interesting, actually, to try to have conversations. And I suppose one of the things I was always delighted about was that, at the briefings that I might run, you'd have right, left and centre at those briefings. And I was always pleased about that, because, you won't get change done without bringing people with you and winning the hearts and minds. I mean, there's a time to be challenging, and that's important. And I also saw that that's very respected. People who are kind of stand for nothing, people kind of spot that quite quickly. But it's also to do so in a way that kind of allows people to learn from you, but also from them back to you. Yeah. None of us has the wisdom, all of the wisdom. We need to be willing to kind of to learn from others. So that was another thing. But again, that would have been a hallmark of, say, when I was working Cork Simon, trying to get housing in places that people didn't want the house, they didn't want people there, they didn't want. So you had a huge persuading job a lot of the time. I mean, I remember a very challenging time when we were opening what was called the Wet Centre in Leitrim Street, and it was like, the heavens and hell opened, and even the school where my son was attending was kind of leading the march against it, and reason flew out the window, and it was, very kind of difficult, challenging time. And there was an elderly woman living at the back of where we were opening up, and I was really concerned for her, because, I didn't want her in her sort of latter years to be scared out of her wits, rightly or wrongly. And so we actually, became quite friendly, and one of the things I used to always do is give my telephone numbers to people and say, look, if you're worried, let me know. And, you know, but you do need to bring people with you. And I mean, again, that Cork Simon was always about community.
Yeah.
And you know, you had to stick your neck out and do hard things and things like, you know, there'll have to be a safe injecting centre in the city. That'll be a tough one. It mightn't be just Cork Simon, but you have to be able to bring people with you, not to be afraid to be ahead of the game in terms of calling things.
Listen. You must be willing to listen.
And be respectful of the. It's easy enough to dismiss people, you know. Very easy. We all love doing it, you know, in the privacy of our own rooms and the chatters that we have. That's kind of part of human life. But unless you bring people with you, and it sounds a bit trite, but it's absolutely, and it does take a village. And I think that one of the things, I suppose, that gets in the way politically of making progress is that politicians, and I think, you know, academics and even organisations very often can't share the credit. It has to be one person
themselves.
Yeah. And like, I suppose I was in a fortunate position that I knew I wasn't going to stand, so I didn't need to brand things so heavily on myself.
Okay.
You know, and as I said, if you have to, you have to. And if you're like fundraising in organisations, you had to. And if you're trying to get, you know, research funding, you have to.
Well, it's impact. It is impact.
But it gets in the way.
It does.
Yeah, but very often it's a great number of people who make a contribution to making things change. And I also think that Alva Smith was a great role model. And she's such a generous woman. And obviously she's got a lot of the credit, and rightly so, but she always speaks about everyone around her and with her.
You mean in relation to Repeal, is it?
Yeah, but almost anything she does, she's one of the, you know, she's a great woman to watch in terms of how to behave, in terms of spearheading change without getting obsessed about it all being about me. Yes, very often people embody a particular cause, and it's useful to do so, but it's a means to the end, and there's always a load of people around that.
Yeah, of course. There has to be, because if it is all about one person as well, it's dangerous if they mess it up somehow by, you know, in this era of social media, a casual or poorly thought out comment can do also the cause immense damage if it's so branded to or bound up with one person. You referred though there earlier to polyvagal theory, which is a technical sounding thing, but is all about the science of safety. And even at this time now of obvious health crisis, a public health pandemic that we're living through, we're all on edge, we're all a bit nervous, stressed, distressed. But also I imagine in politics there's a lot of stress and distress and fear of being wrong. And to influence people, and I've experienced this myself if I've mismanaged something, you know, if you make someone feel unsafe or shame them or make them feel stupid somehow, you can lose an ally fairly quickly as well.
Totally. And you know, I suppose I've always been sort of on the side of the sun rather than the wind. I mean, if you take a person, you're wanting them to take a coat off, well, you can blow it off them, or you can kind of, you know, shine sun so that people decide to take the coat off themselves. So I think, you know, the kind of the how of how we talk policy and is part of the ultimate influence. And I think that, I suppose, just going back to just kind of campaigning in theoretical terms, and I think with campaigning you need to know what you're trying to do, and very often people don't, and it needs to be written in a sentence really. So that's, you know, and it can be, you can have a number of different things, but being really clear. And then against each what are you trying to do, there's a who. And that who can be different. There's no cookie cutter stuff here. So if it's about, for example, adult safeguarding, because I did a lot of work on that, the what was a bill. reasoning behind the bill was not to get it passed all the way through, because it's an enormous piece of social policy, way beyond, what a
One
humble step.
Doyle sitting or whatever, yeah.
Well, it's just big. You're talking about powers of entry, you're talking about new agencies, you're talking about this, that, and the other. Like, it was like, whereas, like, say, the family reunification bill was much smaller, neater, very specific technical change. But just going back to the adult safeguarding bill, the idea of that was to put the concept out into the public domain and in the legislative sphere. And private members' bills are very good at that, even if they don't go all the way through, because you have the minister in front of you and you have the minister's officials. And because of that, then I was able to engage with the minister and the minister's officials, who worked with me right up to the end. Really, really interesting, lovely, engaged people. Harris then on the foot of the prod, really, that came from me, and also, engaging with Michael Harty, who was the then chair of the Joint Oireachtas Health Committee, whom I got on very well with, and, would go down to his office and knock on his door and, engage him and Lorraine, his PA, in conversation. And they were also members of the dementia group that I'd set up. Anyway, Michael gave it time, so then you got the status of a report, then you'd engaged Harris and his officials, and then, there was a memo sent to Cabinet, so therefore adult safeguarding became a formal policy strand within the Department of Health, which was a huge kind of achievement. And then working away with the Law Reform Commission, because again, I knew I'd bitten off way more than I could chew, and engaging with Mary Lafoy, who's been fantastic. She's
great legal mind, yeah.
Oh, and she's so humble. She's so kind of measured, and I'd love to be the way she is eventually, but I think I talk too much. But but again, engaging with her, and then working with Patricia Rickard-Clark.
Great woman.
Always working with other people, just not competing, but kind of, in a different, so therefore, like, I'm, delighted about how that policy, and then I was able to commission research, people that I'd worked with in UCD, Sarah Donnelly and Marisha O'Brien. You'd have a small budget. So, and, I just got a lovely note because we did our submission on Monday to the Law Reform Commission, but I was able to use research that I'd commissioned, but, it was independent in the sense that I gave them a question, they came back, and there was no, doctoring of anything to suit my purpose. There were open questions anyway. But Marisha said, that it was great to be able to do research where there were no strings attached, but that also was fed directly into the political process. So they're the kinds of things that you're able to do. That was adult safeguarding. Then for something else like, family reunification, very different set of kind of actions and people. So the key people really for adult safeguarding was the Minister, the Department of Health, the officials, and the Law Reform Commission. They were my audience.
Okay.
And everybody else then was kind of supporting that. So knowing who you're trying to get to, and also being timely with, knowing what opportunities arose. So I knew that there was a new programme coming up in law reform, so inputted into that, and adult safeguarding appeared on the list, and then kind of their consultation happened. So it's it's kind of knowing what you're about,
an eye on everything. Yeah.
And the opportunity.
Sorry, and then with the family reunification bill, how did you develop an interest in that type of a topic? Were you working with NGOs like NASC and the Immigrant Council of Ireland and those types of groups?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. That was kind of very serendipitous, actually. How that came about was there was a slot. We would get a finite number of private members' slots in the civil engagement group, and there was intense competition for those slots. You can imagine. And we're all sort of very keen on our own little sort of topics. But anyway, there was a slot came up, and there was nothing ready. Okay. And that was something I would kind of, again, would always kind of have something kind of on the shelf. But and I was in a next door office to a man called Simon Murta. I don't know if you've ever come across him. He was working around it was basically a parliamentary group within the Parliament, kind of working on international aid issues. So he had this kind of idea sort of about family reunification. There was a lot of upset about the International Protection Act in 2015 and the fact that the processes that we had in place, which were a bit more generous, were curtailed. And really the bill was simple. It was just about going back to where we were.
Right.
And so kind of, take family reunification, taking adult safeguarding, huge, way out, if I thought about it.
A long-term project.
Yeah, massive, big strand of social policy, like child protection, massive. Whereas this was a technical change to go back to where we were. And I knew that Fianna Fáil had wanted that when it was going through in 2015. So I kind of got them on board, and Sinn Féin supported it as well. And in fact, I got cross-party support. So even though the government opposed it right through the Seanad, I had the numbers.
Right.
So I was able to push through. Then got it into the Dáil. That took ages. Business committee was Claire Daly, pulled it off in the end. So we're kind of courting the business committee members for ages. I mean, there's an awful lot of work that goes into this, and it's a lot of door knocking and being a kind of a pleasant pest, really. Yeah. And being, and just popping up, and then so we got it, and then it got through second stage, was voted all the way through. There was the same time as the abortion legislation was going through, and then it had to go to detailed scrutiny. It got a slot from Guivan O'Quailon, wrote a great report, and then of course they had the Henry VIII of a money message, saying that it would cost money, and it wouldn't, because it was just that a family had a right to apply. That's all it was.
Right.
But again, I'd be hopeful that that will be picked up next time round, because that's a hair's breadth within our reach. So I'd be hopeful that will be reintroduced. But again, the audience around that was really internal, and of course said and led by NASC, by the Irish Refugee Council, and Oxfam Ireland. And there was different people. We started off with Marisa Ryan, and then she moved on from Oxfam, and then we had Roisin Hines, and she moved on, and then we had Rosemary Hennigan, who's now with Focus Ireland, and we've had a lot. You had a lot of Nick, and of course Fiona, the two Fionas. So you had to have somebody holding the thread all of the time, and kind of keeping an eye on the legislative opportunities. But Leinster House is good in that it's very small and you can run into people. So you can come up and say, well, I sent an email about that, and so a lot of work is very kind of it's very ordinary. It's very
very person-centered, actually, isn't it? In the sense of keeping on the ball with the allies that and then the ones that are possibly open, and not letting them forget about you.
No, and I suppose one thing that I would say that NGOs in general can be quite nervous, and I'm not saying it about those NGOs that I've mentioned, and some of the time it's warranted nervousness, because government funding bodies and others can be quite vindictive. But I think very often people don't quite believe that they can actually make things work. Or expected to happen more quickly than actually the matter at hand, and don't have the stamina to see it through, or that they also kind of don't quite, they've internalized oppression or something. I don't know.
Right.
And I suppose the Domestic Violence Act was and bill was really instructive in that. Again, that was a government bill, and there was groups of us very persuaded about kind of particularly coercive control, and that would be written into the law. And when the debates began in the Seanad, it was Frances Fitzgerald was the minister at the time, and she was right, go wrong, that couldn't happen, it couldn't be done, and blah 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 blah, and we just kept going. And then we realised that we were actually tripping each other up, because, say, Ivana Bacik would have a good amendment in, but actually the Sinn Féin one might have been better.
Okay.
And we had to so I took it upon myself to coordinate that effort so that we weren't kind of wasting our own time.
Right, I get you.
And so, and again, there was competing, Safe Ireland were kind of the organisation I worked mostly with. And they have a fantastic barrister, Caroline Coonahan. She's amazing.
Yeah.
And Katrina and Sharon, and they're amazing, lovely group. But there was competition between the NGOs. So, and they'd be maybe 3 words of a difference that made no difference.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of getting in our own way. So we organised ourselves in Sinn Féin, Labour, Fianna Fáil. We all got together. So we had the numbers again. But, and then it was funny, Frances Fitzgerald had, there was the post-McCabe stuff, so she was gone. And instead of Frances, we didn't have Charlie, but we had David Stanton.
Right.
And David Stanton had chaired a Justice and Equality Committee that examined domestic violence, and he was much more open than,
so interesting.
But again, sitting at an event where, again, politicians who might have been sceptical of us getting this in, including people I've mentioned, standing up and kind of taking credit for everything. But there you go.
Sometimes politics, in a way.
But sure, you've won then.
Yeah, you have. And I think that's okay in a way, I was at meetings before to do with Repeal, and I got quite annoyed at the people who were giving out about certain politicians who had one position at a certain point, which was a more conservative position, say in relation to the protection of life during pregnancy bill. And the people in the meeting were kind of going, oh, but sure, they were anti this, anti that, anti the other thing. And I was going, but who cares?
Exactly.
We need to move.
They're on our side now.
We need to shift society. So we need to allow people to change their position in the light of the evidence and in the light of the women who are sharing their stories. I mean,
absolutely. No, absolutely, Jane. I think we're completely at one. And people can kind of rewrite pasts and things like that. But just so what? That's what change is made of.
It is. And also, like you were saying, we have to accept the genuine fears that people can have about things, listen to them, and then try and counter that with evidence or with stories or with the pain and suffering that was, front and center really of the Repeal campaign. Can I talk to you a little bit about that? Because that's actually how I met you in the first place, was on the street outside the Rebels for Repeal office in Cork. Were you involved with this issue for a long time, from your youth kind of thing? Was it something that you struggled with to have our constitution have this provision, the 8th Amendment?
Well, back in 1983, I was 21. So my kind of involvement with all of that was about myself.
Yeah.
It was practically impossible to get contraception in a legal way in Ireland, which seems like mad. And at Tuckey Street, and we'd the Irish Family Planning Association would go in the door like criminal, and you'd be scared that somebody from home would see you, because literally it's like crazy as that.
It is crazy.
So I suppose it was personal. I wouldn't have thought of campaigning. At that particular time. I wouldn't have been connected in with, I was never involved in the Students' Union or anything. I'm a very kind of left of centre thinker, and always have been. And my degree, I think, helped me kind of develop those ideas and positions. But no, I wasn't politically active in that way. I wasn't connecting with the political party. But all my friends, we were all we always had the number. And we pass it around to each other. And I had to go, hadn't have to go, but I went with a young woman in my circle to London. Could have been me, it wasn't me, but it could have been me, it was people I knew. And then when I moved to London, I got involved with the Irish Women's Abortion Support Group, which is just very ordinary young women, my friends. We just kind of used to do a helpline on a Tuesday night in Old Street. People would ring up, women would ring up, and they'd be ringing from a call box. And they'd reverse the charges, and you listen to them and, book them into BPAS or wherever. And sometimes they didn't have the money, so we used to fundraise a little bit to kind of help those who didn't have that. And BPAS were brilliant. They never turned anyone away because of money, but, we knew they there was other Mary Stopes as well. And then sometimes, so there was a helpline, and then there was like women might need a place to stay. So, women stayed with me for a couple of years. My husband was very, very kind of supportive of that. And, the first woman who stayed with us was, she was, seemed like very old. She was probably like 30 or something anyway. Because I was a whippersnapper back then. But anyway, she was the mother of 6.
Oh, goodness.
And she was on her 7th pregnancy. And her husband was unemployed. This is the 80s, Ireland. And she just couldn't face it, couldn't afford it. So she was like against all the stereotypes, if you ever had them. Then another woman came, and I remember her uncle was a very prominent bishop in Ireland, and she was terrified. That
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and this was like, and I remember like all of these things you were thinking, I can't remember this now, I can't remember that name, I can't, blah, 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 just kind of blur it out. And like our role was not, we weren't counsellors, we were there to be like, the women had made their choices, they'd made their decisions, and we were there to make the situation as straightforward as it needed to be, place to stay, nice food, go to the pub, just kind of make it ordinary.
Yeah.
It was lovely. It was really nice. And there was a whole load of us, my friend Kate, who's still in England, and Janet, who's now back home, and friends that I made along the way. And of course, that's where I came across Ivana for the first time.
Yeah. Who is a legend,
Absolutely.
On this issue. And I truly believe it's held her back politically to have been so associated with it for so long. But, she
carried it. And she was made bankrupt at the point that I had met her.
Yeah.
She had, you think of the stellar legal career that she's had, and she has. She was actually she couldn't practice in Ireland. So she had given up so much for principle and cause.
Yeah.
So I've always, admired Ivana, and would be very unsung about that, and kind of almost embarrassed that you'd remember it. But her colleague Ursula Quill and I used to always say, she needs to be like really boasting about this stuff because it was mega. But so that was that. But again, I never mentioned any of this stuff that I was doing to my family.
No, sure.
No, because they would, my mother would have been a very religious woman, and I just didn't have those kind of conversations with them. But I think a lot of the women of my generation were very, well, a lot of us were subterranean, a bit subversive, but not like we'd pass for being kind of respectable as well, because that's the way you needed to operate, otherwise you got nothing done.
Yeah.
And also you didn't know where you'd be talking. And so you didn't really want to get into those stupid arguments and debates, just didn't want to have them. So
it wasn't safe to have them, really.
No, it wasn't, and it wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's why it was such a thrill during the last campaign, to be kind of knocking on doors. And I remember Sarah Clancy was very funny, the poet, talking about, canvassing in rural Clare, saying, knocking on a door and somebody saying, "Are you here about the abortion?" That was just to be, and to open the whole thing up, because again, private troubles, public issues, but we held those private troubles, and the way that we operated around them, people like myself, kind of, I suppose, colluded with that kind of stance. Others didn't, but that was how it was. We lived in a police state, and we didn't really realise it, to be honest. I look back and I think of the self-censorship and I kind of write the odd bit of poetry, but I didn't realise that we were actually so censored.
Yes.
In the public sphere. We weren't in the personal, collective sphere of our friends, but it didn't kind of spill out beyond that. Or there was some people who did, but perhaps not the groups I was part of.
Well, I remember as a religious child in the early 90s, you know, when Sinead O'Connor tore up the picture of the Pope, being utterly shocked and
Really?
horrified and thinking that she was extremely crazy and awful. And then, of course, Brendan Smith and all the scandals came out after that, and the curtain fell and the true horror. I mean, I remember the Kerry babies as a small child and love it. And this was all the backdrop to our treatment of women and our
absolutely. I mean, I was in Tralee during the Kerry babies, and I was a member of the Tralee women's group, and our little paltry activity was to hand out flowers to her going into the courthouse, you know. So I wouldn't.
It's amazing. Again, an amazing act. Terribly sad that it had to be done, you know, just like terribly sad that you needed to provide the service in the UK to lonely women, terrified, lonely, shamed women, really, given the Ireland time. But it must have been amazing, as you described, to have then been working through this and to seeing the shift and to seeing people being receptive and to seeing your fellow senators and TDs really move.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it was less about the statistics, because, you know, the Stalin phrase, you know, a million deaths is a statistic, but, you know, a single one is a tragedy. I mean, it was how people related to the personal. And I think that's such a powerful tool for talking policy and influencing people. So it's taking it back. I mean, you must have the theory, you must have all the facts and the figures, and, you know, people like yourself have been so amazing at kind of commanding those. But to connect people into it, then it's very much on the hearts and minds side of things.
I agree. And getting people's stomach kind of in the gut with the real life. This is me, this is my experience. It shouldn't have been the case, you know, and you guys can help change this for future generations.
And the other big thing that I think in kind of talking policy and influencing people is when one is engaging with people, is to ask them to do something. So, like, you frame, I love this kind of structure for kind of presenting things: frame, advocate, frame, illustrate, advocate, and ask. But very often, again, as a politician, you'd be asked for things that you couldn't do.
Yeah, they're too big.
They're too big, or they're too small, or they're not you.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I'd be lobbied about things that'd be passing through the door. Couldn't do a thing about it, couldn't vote. I could have talked to one person. So I think very often people just either they overwhelm you with information that you actually can't practice or do anything with.
That's a really interesting point. So be more strategic about the ask for different people.
Always ask, because then that involves that person. So you haven't just dumped a problem on them. Bored them. Or scared them. So you kind of just, you know, describe, frame, illustrate it. You know, people, you know, advocate, this is what we need to do, and then ask, can you do X, Y, or Z? And very often, a lot of, like, some of the advocacy I saw was brilliant, and some of it was just a bit kind of like a kind of an unguided missile, you know, or too big.
Yes, yeah.
Don't waste money on fancy publications, I'd say. They get in the bin most of the time.
Yes. We were talking, though, before I actually switched it on about COVID-19, and one thing that it has shown us is the speed with which action can be taken on, for example, rent freezes, on no evictions, on financial aid. What can we learn from this going forward, do you think, Colette?
Well, it's all about political will. That's all it is ever about. All of the things that we want to do can be done if we want to do them. You know, if you think even like the way the abortion legislation was pushed through, I mean, it was like brilliant. You know, the political will is on our side in this instance. There's been so many good things that have happened out of COVID in terms of getting things done. So it is about having the ambition of actually of kind of wanting to make the big change, taking the incremental steps as well, saying, yeah, I'll have that. Thanks very much. I'll take that. That's not like all that I want, but thank you very much. I'll put that in my bag. Not being thrown by setbacks, because there always will be. And there'll be cock-ups and there'll be two steps, you know, three steps forward and two steps back. And also not getting confused, getting the means and the ends confused. I often used to think that, again, in Leinster House, people would think that because they were in past the gate, that it was done.
Right.
Nah.
Yes, it can be a very long process.
Yeah. And then what do you like, if you're doing this, where does that take you next? And what's the next bit? And who else? Mm-hmm. So there's a long game. So, for example, going back to like the really amazing work that you're doing on trauma, like most people don't know anything about it, Jane.
I know.
You know, it's amazing. So actually the big job is to tell people about it, to let people know about it. And different people need to hear about it in different ways. And then they need to be able to do something about it as well. But there's most people that have no idea about it. I mean, I sent it to my husband, and I just said, I think it's really interesting. Just this article, 12 pages, but it's okay. It's very readable. And it was. But the point is, like, that's actually probably a task all by itself.
Oh, it is.
Just to create the word, you know.
It is. And that is something that I'm trying to do. But I also find that there's an element across all societies, this isn't just Irish, that just doesn't want to know about this issue because it is so prevalent. It is not just a poor people issue. It's not a white person issue or an ethnic. It's every education level, some more so than others. Then
I mean, I was burned when I was 2, very badly burned, and I'm sure the experience of that has impacts me today. Absolutely. And I, wouldn't have ever thought about that, so absolutely. The resistances, there will always be resistance. When again, we're in the UK back in the day around childcare and early years, and it was always about, if their mother isn't with them 24/7, they're brain damaged forever and you're a bad woman and all the rest. And we're very, I don't know, maybe the further generations are more or less prone to that guilt, but God almighty, like our generation of women or the crossover generation, because our, kind of like guilt was a very easy thing to trigger. So it was all that shit, like, but, again, you stuck to your guns. You tried to understand where people were coming from. Yeah, there's actually some childcare facilities, in my view, in this country and elsewhere, are horrible places, and they possibly are not good for our kids. So, you know what I mean? But the idea that people can't kind of have collective care around children, and that it has to be a mom at home all the time, breastfeed until they're 10, kind of is, nonsensical. But so there will always be resistance, and some will be ideological, some will be scared, some will be lived experience. So again, it's about engaging with that. But so with the trauma, yes, it scares the daylights out of people, and it should do, because it's a very frightening. What you know is scary to know.
It is, because we need to respond better and try and prevent what we can prevent, and then be kinder and more compassionate and supportive where we can when people survive things. In terms of cultural trauma, I'm interested in the situation of the traveling community and the legacy of historical, brutal, kind of obliteration of a way of life.
Genocidal in some ways, yeah. I mean, it was a term that was very close to my mouth when I kind of, when I look at the statistics, you just think, Christ, you know, this is obliteration. This is, it's not onesie,
yeah,
but it's onesie by omission, by you know, and yeah. I mean, I, you know, felt so strongly and get very upset that people are living in just direst of circumstances, and there's such stigma attached to people, you know, their very identities, and then there's such savage prejudice and discrimination.
Yeah, it makes it very hard to just be healthy, you know, to feel safe in the world around people. If you're a traveler around people who are not travelers, I can only imagine the fear and the waiting for abuse, really, abuse and ignorance.
That's right. Or let down or being exploited. And I mean, again, I was very conscious of that, the work that I did there. I mean, my endeavour was to do it with and through travellers, and there was a young man, Owen, who worked with me in the organisations. But, you know, I was always very kind of, you know, I'm a settled woman, you know, kind of was reasonably well to do. Like what was my gig there? You know, what was I trying to, what kind of, you know, that's an interesting question in itself, probably to do with your psychotherapist couch. But anyway, but yeah, I totally understood why people would be suspicious, at the very least, of people kind of being allies. And, you know, just because you say you are,
doesn't mean you are. Yeah.
No, and there's so much you don't know yourself. You know, there's so much you don't know about yourself and what you think and what you bring to the party. You know, there's so much of who we are that we don't see. We see bits of it. We
That's
see
right,
bits of it bad. But there's, you know, there's the personal unconscious, and then there's also the collective unconscious that, you know, that goes on. So,
but
yeah.
there's a nice phrase that Karen Traceman uses, hostile attribution bias, that if you've grown up in a world with a lot of interpersonal trauma or abuse or neglect or racism or homophobia, you're on the lookout for it. So even neutral expressions can be read as hostile. And I guess some of the fear maybe from travellers in relation to wannabe allies is it real, or we need to do it for ourselves? But of course, travellers live in the world with the rest of us.
That's right. And
get their issues and their health and education and work outcomes prioritized. They also do need people who are not travellers, just like we needed men to vote for repeal.
Exactly.
And, you know, we need to bring people along with us is the point.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the directions have to be set and led by travellers. But, you know, like, and I was so disappointed that Eileen didn't get over the line yesterday. But, like, again,
she's amazing, Eileen Flynn.
And she's great, and she only missed by 2 votes, and hopefully she'll be on the Taoiseach's list, and or a traveller will be. But, like, even if she was elected, she's still one of 60. She's still so. And we all have a responsibility. I don't want to live in an Ireland where I know a few kilometres up the road from me are people living in the direst of poverty, where people don't have running water, where people are overcrowded, where people are living in death traps. That's not the kind of country I want to live in. So I have a responsibility to make that happen. That isn't for me to tell people what to do, but it is my responsibility as a citizen to care about that. And the fact that there's only 40,000 travellers in the country means that they will always need allies. And I think what people can do is change the kind of conversations that we have about travellers, and that's a contribution we can make. But, you know, saying that people are very very, very, on the, on scared around, the motivations of people, and kind of skeptical and cynical and perhaps whatever, or on red alert. I've also met people from, who I've worked with from the traveller community, who've kind of have, they are in the realms of the extraordinarily evolved. I have to say, as I said, I mentioned Mary Lafoy, you meet people in your life who are gone into a different plane of,
right.
of knowledge, and I'm not there. I'm still too much in the world.
A work in progress.
Talk too much, but maybe it will descend. But there are people, because of what they've gone through, and the Viktor Frankls of this world, who've come out better from the trauma that was visited upon. I don't think that's a great, it's not my psychotherapy remedy for everybody that we all should go through extreme situations. There's extreme trauma. So you do get the kind of the red alert, but you also get the amazing, I don't know if you've ever met Missy Collins. She's an older traveller woman. Yeah. You are in the presence of incredible wisdom when she walks through the door. Like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But
just has an aura, kind of spiritual, white aura. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now people shouldn't have to, become wise through the adversity, but I see that too. And I think that, the traveller community is huge. I met a selection of people in my work. I've become great friends with a lot of people from that community and from other places as well. And other, that's been one of the great things, just to come across so many activists from so many different kind of walks of life. Certainly educated me. But you just see that kind of, and I think Alva Smith has that too. I think that that kind of aura of wisdom and knowledge. And and I just think that's an important part about influencing people as well.
I'm going to let you go in 2 seconds, but you did some work in relation to education in the traveller context, didn't you, Colette, about the curriculum? Why do you think that is important going forward, that we teach kids about traveller culture in the schools?
Because it's part of all our history. So like, if you think about a family, I did my first year kind of psychotherapy, family therapy course, which I paused this year because it's just had too many things going on, but I've plenty of time now to be picking these things up. Anyway, one of the things you do is a genogram. I don't know if you've ever come across it. I love genograms. But anyway, so it's you kind of
family tree.
Yeah, but you fill out the parts of your family tree, and you also kind of can see patterns when you do that, and it's really interesting too. Anyway, so traveller culture and history, if you think of our kind of historical narrative, we're missing a big piece of our collective history, because we don't know about traveller culture and history. We don't know about it. There's and it leads to loads of myths and bull and nonsense, and it leads to bad policy making because of that gap. So for all of us, every last one of us, all our children, ourselves, that gap needs to be filled in, because that gap is damages us actually, and it leads us to do damaging things to people. So that's why it's important. And then it's also important for all of us and for all our children, and for better policy making, better law, better understanding, better sort of actions. And Maya Angelou's, when you know better, you do better. Totally agree with that. But it's also important then for travellers themselves, who, because of that gap, that fear, that prejudice, have been, kind of pushed to the very limits and the very margins. The very ground that's under travellers has been taken from them. Their babies die young. Their people don't live to a great age. Suicide levels are off the scale. Jobs don't finish school, so much talent kind of dissipated. So for those people then in the institutions and in the institution of schools, part of their pride is to know that where they come from, why their identity is so important, and that's taught as a general topic for everybody, and it isn't for them to carry the burden of knowing that belongs to us all. So I think it's hugely important. Of course, how all of that is done and how it's taught, you can do things very badly. I mean, I remember my kids went to school in London, and they were there till my daughter was 12, my son was 10. And we used to do Black History Month and all that stuff. And it was well done. It was well done. It was well taught. And therefore, like, you had in that generation of children who grew up are very enlightened. It isn't just about that, but it was part of that. And, the racism wasn't tolerated really. So you begin that, people push back. So it's a necessary step, but it's not a sufficient step.
Yes.
But it's a big part. And as I said, it's for all of us. I remember organising a briefing on the bill, and Carol Kitchen was there, but also Dave Edwards from UCC, like yourself. And Dave Edwards was just talking about, the history of traveller culture and history, and talking about, the phrase that he used. And I remember like hair standing up on the back of my neck as the oldest of the Irish, and like that was a packed briefing, and there was people from all parts and all walks of life, and like really people, kind of got it. And instead of the usual stuff, which is maybe about all the tragedies or the mental ill health or the other narrative, which we won't even repeat, the Peter Casey's of this world. This was a third narrative. It was kind of like talking about this group of people who've carried, an old way into modern times, and framed their identity, and it has made that group very distinct and very special to us all, and not special in a thinking, you're so special, kind of a
patronizing type of a way.
Significant to us all. So like for us all to know that, it's a lovely story to know, but also has resonance in terms of how people, the children that are going to school today, feel, and your children, and all the children kind of relate to each other and travellers, and breaking that terrible barrier.
Healing the wound, really, a way of healing the wound, and the wound that we inflicted, the rest of us, some of us unknowingly or whatever, but that we have a responsibility to begin healing it.
Exactly. And even if our efforts are a little bit, naive, or maybe the words don't always come out right, it's fine. It's fine. We get through those, and as we kind of link to each other, then we'll begin to trust each other. Like we don't, I don't know how you get on with your husband or your family or your brothers, I don't know. But like we'd often say the stray words to each other.
Of course.
But they're not the end of the world, because they're people we love ultimately. So whereas at the moment, as you say, there's a lot of hyper vigilance, and for good reason, and then there's a lot of ignorance / prejudice on the other side. So kind of we're needing to kind of to bring both of those things together so that we can have dialogues, difficult conversations, but honouring the lineage, the history, the culture that this grouping in our family, in our national family has. And I think that's really, really important. And I was glad to be part of that. I mean, the bill was not my idea. The bill came from the traveller organisations themselves. I mean, I just said, we have a slot for legislation. What could we do? And that's what came back. So, and again, hopeful. I had a very nice email from Padraig McLaughlin. So he said, he'll go to work to pick that up where it left off. So, and I'm sure he will. He was a great, such a lovely man. And
he's a nice man,
Yeah, there's so many nice men and women across party. You wouldn't agree with, like, I mean, Eamon O'Keefe has been, you know, we wouldn't have not agreed on a lot of things, including repeal. We got on great around kind of traveller rights and issues. Mary Butler and myself, again, very different positions. We were on a flight to Scotland to look at dementia care, and I said, Mary, there's one thing we need to get out of the way. We'll be on different sides on all of this, you know. And I said, we won't persuade each other, you know.
So let's just leave it.
Let's leave it. Let's park it and work away on dementia together. And you know, that was we did, and you know, she battled hard on that one with me and others. So, you know, yeah, you have to be, you know,
pragmatic as well.
Yeah, and also just recognise that we're all made up of different things. But
we are.
Anyway. So I hope I've given you what you need.
You've given me so what I needed and more. You're an inspiration, and thank you so much for the work that you did over the last 4 years and the many years before that and the many years to come and whatever you go on to do next.
I'm thinking I might write this up as a little paper, but
you should.
I'll have time on my hands now, God knows. As I said, I had intended to take a break in this period, but I hadn't expected the whole world would come with me.
I know.
In shutdown, I was thinking, that was kind of, I'll have a nice leisurely April and I'll see then what I might do. And
I might go on holidays abroad even, you know.
I'll visit my friends and kind of, but a word to my poor son, he's in Paris. But he's with friends and he handed in his notice, you see, in his flat. And he's like as of today, so he's actually kind of technically homeless, but he's with a friend. And then there's the friend's flatmate was meant to be gone, but now she's coming back. So Lord, we'll have to have him airlifted out of the place. But anyway.
Hopefully he'll make it back safe and sound anyway before too.
Well, I don't think he really wants to be hanging out with his parents here in Cork.
Probably not. But
it might be a better solution than the streets of Paris. But anyway, anyway, he did his he's an anthropologist and he did his work on funeral rights. So I was thinking there's loads now in terms of what has happened because of COVID and how that has kind of impacted. I mean, poor funeral directors. It's like so traumatic. And
it is for everyone, really. But the poor people who are dying, the family members who can't see them, the medical people who can't touch them or offer any real support. Talk about a mass trauma, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that was one of the things I always thought was, I was there when my mom died and my sister, and I was in England, but I got back on time. I always just assumed that would be something that would be a given, and not so much so, I guess,
Not at the moment.
Yeah, but anyway, listen, goodbye.
Thank you so much.
The shops and the lollies and all that.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Jane. Thanks. Bye. Bye.